the earth is going to be okay. It's going to survive us. No matter what we do to the planet, we're not going to win. The earth is. Now, in the meantime, we might kill ourselves off. The earth will survive us, but we might not survive us. And that's what today's lecture is really about. We call it sustainability. Sustainability is us being able to use what the earth gives us. Those are called ecosystem services, without running out and without ruining it for your future children or grandchildren or beyond. How do we keep nature in balance while using what it gives us? How, as humans, can we assess if we're being sustainable or not? What are the things to look for? Well, we call those indicators. And there's 5 main indicators that we look at to see if our practices are working or not working. So biodiversity is one way we can measure the health of an ecosystem. We tend to think that larger amounts of species indicates that the ecosystem is thriving, if it can support lots of different kinds of organisms. But in reality, the opposite might be true. We could create an ecosystem where there all of a sudden is competition between organisms for those resources. We go back just after the last ice age, and obviously human population was very small then still, but the majority of animals were wild. We didn't have domesticated organisms. And now, as part of our food production, which you see as another indicator, we see that we're down to 1% wild animals. That's also a result of habitat destruction, taking away places for wild animals to live. That's a result of urbanization, which we covered last week. Paying attention to the climate is important. We all know that the temperatures, average temperatures each year are rising. The amount of carbon dioxide is rising on a scale that we've never seen before. And that's a greenhouse gas. It's not the only one, which is even more scary. We see other greenhouse gases rising as well. So all of those are indicators that our current energy uses, the release of greenhouse gases through burning fossil fuels, is not going to be sustainable for our human population. That's the third one we can watch. Population growth. Are we able to track a population and manage it in a way that it won't exceed its carrying capacity? Or that's the maximum number that the Earth can support. Right now, we think the Earth can handle about 15 billion people. And we're approaching 8 billion. So we have quite a few more that we can add. But I want you to think about your life. How would it change if we double the Earth's population? What would you have to give up? Technology in the past has found ways to expand our carrying capacity. We've come up with new farming techniques to produce enough food for a growing population. So human ingenuity can create more space for sustainability with these indicators. I've already touched on food production, but an indicator would be if we start seeing more famine, then obviously we're not living sustainably with our agriculture. And finally, we've got reserves. Reserves are the known amounts of, usually we talk about minerals, things like gold is a mineral reserve. There's probably more gold than we know about. We just can't get to it all. So we call gold the resource, and the known amount of resource is called a reserve. So managing our reserves. Another good example of a reserve would be oil. We know there's lots and lots of oil still in the ground. Some of it we can't get to, Some of it is not cost effective. So those are issues that affect sustainability of something like oil. You can look at all this graphically, and when we do, it's not really a good sign. So it's kind of a bummer seeing this, right? Population skyrocketing, greenhouse gases are skyrocketing, fertilizer, which we'll get into the environmental effects of that. We didn't even use it before 1900. On one way, it's good because it leads to good crop production. But on the other hand, we've got an environmental cost. Tragedy of the commons, we simulated with little goldfish crackers. The fishing industry is a great example of sustainability. How do we take enough fish to feed us, but not enough that we ruin the whole ecosystem? One last term I'd like to show you today, sustainable yield. Sustainable yield, this term comes right out of the College Board standards. And here's how I would define sustainable yield. It is using the resource without decreasing supply. So the earth replaces what we take all by itself. That would be the maximum sustainable yield. We could actually not take it all. We could underutilize. That doesn't necessarily help us. So we may as well take as much as we can while still being sustainable. So that's the optimal. And of course, we saw in our demonstration what happens if you take too many fish, then we run out. The earth can't replace it fast enough. The yield was too high.